Welcome to LATV and Neighborhood Snapshot. My name is Bob Sardelli. I am a member of the Leominster Historical Commission. Today we welcome to the LATV studios Mr. Robert Creed Sr., Mr. Robert Creed Jr., Mr. Donald Creed, and Mr. James Creed. Bob and his family will share some memories of an area of Leominster many of you in the viewing audience pass by almost every day, and many of you actually frequently visit and utilize for recreation. The Plains area, Doyle Field, Lower North Main Street, the east side of Houghton Hill section of the city. Bob, we welcome you and your family. So, gentlemen, I won't shake your hands now because if I do, I'll unhook the microphone and we'll have a disaster here. Bob, you're a lifelong resident of Leominster. You were born and reared in Leominster. How old are you?
I'm 85.
85, you were born
in? Born in 1923.
1923, so that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
And you have served your country well, and your brother, and
yes.
We're going to mention that. And we're going to talk about some of the memories that you'll share with our audience growing up. And your sons, Bob Jr. and Jim, and your nephew, Don, are going to also share some of the memories and help us out in this interview. Before we start, Bob, I'm going to read something about a time in history related to Doyle Field that you remember the building of Doyle Field, yeah. But this predates the building of Doyle Field. And this is from the latest history book of Leominster, Combing Through Leominster's History, which is available at City Hall. Let me read this excerpt from Combing Through Leominster's History. Doyle Field. Early in 1929, Bernard W. Doyle, the mayor of Leominster, suggested to his colleague Raymond L. Middlemass, treasurer of Leominster Savings Bank, that the city needed a modern athletic complex. To process Doyle's plan, a committee of Mr. Middlemass, John M. McPhee, and Bertram H. Hayes was formed to select a site. In March of 1929, the committee selected the old trotting park on Priest Street, and Mr. Doyle authorized the committee to make the purchase. The trotting park was built and operated by Walter Robbins and John Pierce for nearly half a century. This was before your time. Once considered one of the best race courses in the area, the park had not only a half-mile track, but grandstands and stables besides. It had been the site of sporting events, carnivals, circuses, as well as horse and dog racing. Over the years, however, interest in horse racing had declined, so when the owners died, the property was divided into building lots and sold to several people. By the time Mr. Doyle's committee was considering the site, streets had been laid out and 3 houses were built. Part of the extensive negotiations included halting all building, moving the 3 houses to suitable lots on nearby Grand Street, and tearing up the new roads. Do you remember any of that, Bob?
Well, I remember that when I was going to school, and I went to Priest Street School.
Yeah, so elementary school.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they were digging up, there, and we couldn't imagine, what they were doing. They were making, it took quite a while, because they didn't have the equipment that they have today.
Yes. Yeah.
But in 1931, when they dedicated it, I went over to Doyle Field, and I was sitting by the clubhouse, and they had all kinds of bands down there, and they had a big celebration. And my father came over and wanted to know why I was sitting up in the upper field by the clubhouse, and I said, well, I didn't feel too swift, I said the bands are making too much noise and everything. I said, I think I'll go home. Well, make a long story short, I had an earache. And that earache was a mastoid, which when I was,
That's a serious thing.
I was 8 years old,
Yeah.
and I had to have that taken care of, and now I have a scar behind my ear from that. Of course, today they have all the antibiotics, and you don't have you don't hear of a mastoid, you know.
Right, right.
But
I remember as a little kid having some earaches, and those are not pleasant.
Oh, lasted about 2 weeks before I went to the hospital.
Do you remember, so you remember you were about 8 years old then. I remember talking to you one time about this, and you lived right, to set this in so members of the audience know what we're talking about. Don had mentioned Houghton Hill. That's the hill.
Yes.
That's
now they call it. They made Houghton Court.
Yes, Houghton Court.
No.
And there's a new square in Leominster down by the Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's Houghton Square.
Yeah.
Mr. Sherwin Drury had a lot to do with that. He's on the Historical Commission. He had a lot to do with that, getting that set up.
That's right.
But you lived on one of those, you grew up on one of those houses, and then later on you owned one of those houses that sits on Don, it would be the east side of the hill?
Be well, east side of Houghton Hill.
East side of
Right.
Houghton Hill.
Yeah,
so
right.
it's still one of those houses that are right face North Main Street. Today, for the viewing audience, it would be, if you were to look across where the former executive offices of Victory Supermarket, the executive's offices were, and there's a strip mall, there's a tire place, used to be City Tire. At one time there was, what was the
That was a
diner?
retread.
Yep. Joe's
Joe's
Back in the
Diner,
50s and
and now
60s.
there's Don's Diner there now, and there's the new location of Buckley Religious Articles. So there's that. So it's that area that we're talking about.
Right.
And you even told me that you remembered some of. I had found a picture of there were huge greenhouses there at one time.
The
but
greenhouses were torn down.
They were torn down.
In my time, you know, and I remember going over where, you know, over they get filled in, you know,
Through
from
the years.
Elements and whatnot.
Right.
And along they had the red bricks where they had an aisle for the greenhouses, you know.
But
that's what I remember of them.
Yes, and you look at some of these old photographs of Leominster, and there were many greenhouses in those days. It was a big industry. In fact, Leominster was, I guess, the cucumber capital, growing capital of the country, or the world, at least the United States, and it shipped all over the place. And lots and lots and lots of square footage under greenhouses, under glass. And now today there's very few. We have some. But the orientation on the east side of Houghton Hill was just right, because that's a nice and sunny spot. Even up by Leominster Hospital, I have another photograph here. This is a photograph of sort of your neck of the woods, up the street. But the Leominster Hospital years ago, and there were some lots of greenhouses. I think probably by the DeMassa Drive area of town, and in other sections of town too. Lots and lots of square footage under glass for greenhouses. Another place, Bob, that was in your neck of the woods is the Wellington Piano Case Company.
Right.
And which today is still there, but it's not. The building is there, but it's now
it's apartments.
Apartments, condominiums.
Wellington Apartments.
Wellington Apartments. But at one time, it was a major piano case manufacturing site in Leominster. Leominster was noted for the manufacture of piano cases and pianos. We had a number of.
And then Seelig.
And then Seelig's took it over as furniture company. Yes. That building was also almost torn down at one time.
Actually, Bob, my great-grandfather, Uncle Bob's grandfather, worked at the Wellington Piano Factory, and that's the reason that he built the house on North Main Street.
Yeah.
As all those houses in the Plains area were built up because most of the people walked to work at that factory.
Because there weren't a lot of cars then.
Correct.
So that's how the manufacturing and that developed. So those were actually houses of the workers.
That's exactly right.
This building, you may very well remember this, the hurricane of 1938.
That's right. It took the corner, the corner right off it on the Green Street side. You know, knocked the bricks right off it.
Right.
You know.
So there was.
Oh, that hurricane was really something. And as a matter of fact, right across the house there was a big tree, and it went right across both them railroad tracks.
Yeah, double tracks
And
there.
part of it landed on Parkman Coal. There used to be the Parkman Coal used to be there in Allen Court ran.
There was a coal.
Ran there, you know, and they had there was double tracks, and they used the freight trains would come up and they would bring the coal cars, and as a matter of fact they went all the way down to the crossing, and
that's the intersection.
The gas company used to burn coal, and they would get it in the freight cars and the coal cars, and they would they bring the conveyor up and load the truck up and take it down Mill Street to their
to the
facility.
gas plant. And that's another, you've seen a lot of changes since you were a kid, and now we don't, well, we still burn coal and, you know, for electricity and so on, but now, what are some of the other changes you've seen in, like, the conveniences when you were a kid, from the time you were like an 8 or 9-year-old at home, and we have now central heating, and we have cell phones, and we have TV and all that. Do you remember, you were before the era of TV and all of that, all those things. What are some of your other recollections?
Well, we used to have a radio. That's you know
early days of radio.
We had no TV, and you had the Victrola,
which is that's Greek to any kids who are in the. What's the Victrola? We know what it is.
Well, it's a phonograph, you know.
Phonograph.
Yeah.
Well, phonograph might be a.
Well, yeah, that's what we call it, Victrola, you know. And the old RCA had the horn.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of that.
Yeah, right.
And the dog, I forget what the dog's name was, but you know,
that was
the logo of RCA.
Yeah,
RCA.
that was many years ago, but that we've seen a lot when I was first growing up. We had the flood.
1936.
Yes, right, and
yeah.
The water was on Pleasant Street was like 6 feet deep.
Yeah.
And downtown it was probably 18 inches.
Yes, the Leominster got flooded downtown.
Monusnock Brook.
Monusnock Brook overflowed, and still at times when we have flood times, it still gets. I know Don is on the fire department, and I see down by the credit union there, they watch the brook. It's coming up, coming up, coming up. So the 36 and 38, that's in the midst of the Depression, and we had those two disasters regionally. The flood of 36, which did tremendous damage in Leominster, and then the hurricane of 38.
Then there was the hurricane of 38.
Right. And many of the people whom I interview, they remember those, you know, the flood, and especially I asked them about the tornado. Once you, the hurricane, once you live through something like that, you never forget it.
Well, I was doing my paper route on that day, and geez, when I got to the house, my father said, "That's as far as you're going today, you know, because you know it's too bad to deliver them papers tomorrow, you know, because you know the trees. I was up on top of High Street there, and you could see the chimneys going going off, and it was really something.
Better head home. Better head home. When you were a kid, now you were a scout, and your brother Milton,
Yeah.
you were very, very much involved in Scouts, and then later on that led you to give back service to Scouts, and we'll show some of your items before. But both you and your brother Milton, Don's dad, what troop? And
We
you
were in Troop 7.
Troop 7,
Yeah.
which is connected to what, the
That was a Baptist
Church.
And then from Cub Scouts to Boy Scouts, and then I was assistant scoutmaster at St. Leo's with Sid Going, and then I was a neighborhood commissioner
Of Scouts.
for Scouts.
Scouting, yeah.
And I took the troop to Winnoxet.
Camp Winnoxet, New Hampshire.
We went there. Bob, my son knows that, because.
Yeah.
He keeps track of all of us also.
Oh boy, I'll tell you, that was, and.
Then you got into the Order of the Arrow.
The Order of the
Yeah,
Arrow.
I was in the Order of the Arrow, Brotherhood in the Order of the Arrow. And they have a recognition there for the.
Yes, your scouting service. This is a commendation. The Executive Board of the Wachusett Council, Boy Scouts of America, takes pleasure in awarding the Certificate of Appreciation to Robert E. Creed in recognition of service to boys. And it's February 11th, 1957, and it's signed by the Scout Executive and the Council President at the time. So you and your brother were very much involved in Scouting, and now, fellas, did you get involved too because of
Oh, yeah.
that? Yeah?
Yes.
We went up through scouting, but I never went into as a Cub Master or
Yeah,
Scout Master.
And Don and Jim,
I made it to about second class.
second class. I have to say at this point, I made it to first class. I had 2 merit badges, and that was as far as I went. But it's Scouting. Jim, what?
I was first class also.
First class?
At
So,
Troop 11.
Bob, you outrank us all. So.
I was Star Scout, and my brother, he made Eagle.
Eagle Scout,
Yeah.
which is Milton. That's a tremendous honor. Scouting, wonderful organization, and I wish that every boy could be a Cub Scout and a Boy Scout, and every girl could be a Brownie and a Girl Scout, because it's a wonderful, wonderful organization, a service organization.
yes.
Speaking of service, because you served the Scouts, you went into the service.
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to show the audience something now. You were in the Navy.
I was in the Navy. Oh, yes.
But you were
I was on merchant ships.
the Merchant Marine in the Atlantic, right?
I was in every theater of war.
So Pacific.
Oh yes, I was in the Atlantic and Pacific. You name it, I was there. The only run I didn't go on was the Mermans.
Mermans.
To Russia.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Merchant Marine is kind of the forgotten service of the United States services.
Well, that's right.
And they've finally been recognized, but they were the ones who brought the supplies and the troops and everything to
And that's the
different
same way with the
theaters.
armed guard. They weren't recognized until the war was over.
Was over.
Because we served on merchant ships. Now, I served on 3 different ships: the SS David Stone, the SS American Press, and the SS Stephen Johnson Field.
And this was at the height of World War II when battles were going on. Terribly, terribly dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
And we have, it's interesting to note, we have a gentleman in town, Don Montrim, who is very, very much interested. He's associated with LATV, and he has done He's very much interested in the merchant marine in their service. I guess it's the longest battle. The Battle of the Atlantic happens to be the longest lasting battle of World War II, and the merchant marine hasn't really been recognized, and they should be. And through these interviews, maybe you know some of these gentlemen. Robert Corder, Bob Corder, he was.
I think I met him.
Met him in
I
Merchant
think I met
Marine,
the gentleman.
and George Arsenault too. So I'll bet there are a number of gentlemen who served. And you, I'm going to read something. This is a commendation from Navy Department, Bureau of Naval Personnel, and I'm going to read what it says. From Chief of Naval Personnel to Creed, Robert Edward, Coxswain, V6, United States Naval Reserve, Commanding Officer, Armed Guard Center, Receiving Station, South Brooklyn, New York. Subject commendation. 1, the Chief of Naval Personnel takes pleasure, and this is the date will be here. The Chief of Naval Personnel takes pleasure in commending you, Bob, for your outstanding service as a member of the Armed Guard Unit aboard the SS David Stone during action against enemy aircraft en route to Gibraltar in convoy on 13 August 1943. 2, a report of the experience reveals that the convoy was attacked by a formation of torpedo bombers which approached from dead ahead, coming out of the setting sun and flying very low over the water. As they flew down the column of ships, launching torpedoes and strafing the decks with machine gun fire, they were met by a terrific barrage of shell fire from the armed guard crews, your crews. The guns of the David Stone, that's your ship, were particularly effective, shooting down 2 bombers in flames and contributing greatly to the successful defense of the convoy. 3, your courageous and brilliant performance in this engagement was in keeping with the best traditions of the United States Naval Service. And 4, a copy of this letter has been part of your official record in the Bureau, and it's signed by the Chief of Naval Personnel. And we have a little artifact. I'm going to hold this up.
Oh, yeah.
Now, explain, this looks like, I see
That's a 20 millimeter shell.
mounted on a piece of wood now, but it's all,
Yes, yeah.
what's the story of this?
Well, when I was taking the magazine off, I had my hands up there ready to take it off. And
Now, when you say magazine, for the audience, we're not talking about a magazine. We're talking about the container that holds
that's what contains
the shells.
The shells.
Right.
In other words, it holds 60 rounds
of these
of ammunition.
anti-aircraft.
And we only put in 57 rounds in them. And it's supposed to have 15 pounds of initial tension on there, you know. And apparently this magazine didn't have that initial 15 pounds of tension on it. And so when that shell came down, it came down too slow. The firing pin hit it, and it prematurely went in the breech of the gun, and it just blew the sides right off, and that's where the shrapnel just flew at us, and the gunner, Coos, he really got it. He got it in his face because he couldn't protect himself at all, and he didn't expect it anyway, you know. But that was really something, you know.
And you were wounded.
And we were wounded, yes.
Yeah. And is this what?
And our officer took us down into his quarters, and he was picking out the shrapnel with the tweezers.
Pieces of metal.
And, when we got to Gibraltar the next day, we had to go to sick bay, and the medical officer there said that our officer did one hell of a good job at doing it, because they apparently was no more shrapnel that they could detect
that he had
you
taken
know,
it
in
all
there,
out.
you know?
And this is the purple hat from.
That's the purple hat
This is the purple hat that you won, and so this is a great honor, and so I'm showing this. Okay, and at this point we have to thank all servicemen who served, because we in the United States don't appreciate this very often. We enjoy the freedoms and all the bounty of our country because of men like you who have served. Your brother Milton also served.
Yes. Now, Milt was a chief petty officer, and he was stationed down in New Caledonia. When we went, when I went down in the Pacific, I stopped at we were at Bougainville, and we had 300 troops on there, and this PT pulled up along the side, and I said to the gun, I said, "Geez," I said, would you happen to know my brother?" I said, "He's on the PT." I told him, "Milt Creed." Yeah. "Oh," he said, "he's down at the base, and we'll have him come up tomorrow on the patrol." Well, of course, tomorrow we were gone.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we pulled out. We took those troops up to Lingayen Gulf. That's in the Philippines. You know.
And,
Yeah.
you mentioned the PT. Now, this is Don's dad. Don.
Yeah, my dad was in PTs, and he was in. He was a chief ship fitter, and he was in a squadron. He was in charge of a squadron of boats, and one of the boats under his command was the infamous PT 109 that Jack Kennedy served on, and he knew Jack Kennedy, and a few stories he used to tell about him, you know. But yeah, he definitely remembers Jack Kennedy and the 109, and I think there's a picture of one of the PT boats. I'm not sure which one, but
so we again, it's important to note we can't give enough thanks to men and women who served us in all the wars. We enjoy, you know, freedom isn't the cliche, but it's so true. Freedom isn't free, and we live in a wonderful country, and thanks to a generation of heroes. So, thank you. Now, it wasn't all battles all the time.
Well, yes.
This is I see some men in Arab headdresses, and I see 4 sailors on camels, and I see the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx in the background. What's the story on this, Bob?
Well, when we pulled into Alexandria, Egypt, we dropped anchor, and our officer said that he thought we might be there for a little while. I don't know whether we were waiting for a convoy or what, but he said our boats in there, Brownie, he's pictures on there, him and three others. We took the train and went to Cairo, and that's when we got on the camels. We had a ride on the camels to the Sphinx and the pyramids, and it was quite an experience. Of course, it was hot, and we had our whites on, you know, and you know what happened when you got back? We had,
you all look nice and clean and spiffy there right now.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's quite a picture. So the service to the country got you see many parts of the world.
Yes,
many parts of the world.
Matter of fact,
although sometimes not on nice conditions, though.
No,
we shot at and everything.
We started off from Charleston, South Carolina, and we went down to San Juan, Puerto Rico, from there down to Trinidad. Then we went across to Africa, and on the Ivory Coast, we unloaded the number 3 hold, and I bet you can't guess what was in it.
I have no idea.
It was beer.
Beer.
It was for the troops for Christmas.
Yeah.
And we pulled out of there, we went down to the Gold Coast, and we unloaded, and we loaded up with everything, with all Chinese markings on the boxes. And we figured we were going to China. But we didn't. We went down around the Cape of Good Hope. We went all the way, we went to India, Karachi and Bombay. And then we went to the island, we went to Columbus on the island of Ceylon, which now I think they call it Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka?
Yeah.
Sri Lanka, yeah.
Yeah. But when we were there, it was Ceylon.
Yeah.
And we had, the reason we were there because they have a 9-knot tide there, and our ship was wide open, would probably go 10 knots, you know. And so we had to wait for the tide in order to go up, and then we went to visit Patan, and we had to wait to get into Calcutta. And the Calcutta, they only had 2-ton cranes to unload the ships, you know, and that's not, you know,
Take forever.
not very efficient in today's world, you know. So when they got unloaded, they moved us to another dock, and they put a gangplank up to number 2 hole, and they had freight cars. They opened the door, and what came out? Coal. And they scoop it up in baskets, and take up the gangplank and dump it in the hole. And it was like an endless chain, you know what I mean? And then we went back to the dock when to finish loading, because if they kept that up, we'd have been here the war would have been over, I think. You know?
So all of these things, but the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and so on, and they wouldn't be able to function if it weren't for like the Merchant Marine, and and even
That's
today,
right.
the logistics.
Right, because,
so the supply. And you
there was 144,000 armed guard during the war.
Wow.
In there, you know, and at the beginning, they lost, I think, 2,400 ships.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they realized that they had to put the guns on the merchant ships. So that's where they put the gun turrets on there. And like I say, we had 9 20 millimeters and either a 5-inch 38 or a 4-inch 50 on the stern of the ship, and a 3-inch on the bow.
And you protected those convoys.
Well, yeah, well, right. We were fortunate. We never got sunk, but we had
Came
a lot
close,
of
close calls.
submarine
Close calls.
scares, you know,
Yeah.
especially, you know, and we weren't always in convoy, you know, like when we first went, there were just two ships. We went right across on the to Africa, no convoy.
And then they started convoying later, and that
Well,
was an improvement.
yeah, about when we get about 500 miles from land, we might see a seaplane
Yeah.
that was patrolling, you know, and whatnot. But
So you got through the war ends, you come back to Leominster, and then
I got married just before I got out of the service,
yeah,
and
Yeah, now I tried, I remember when we talked about the interview initially, I asked if your wife wanted to be here, but she preferred not to be.
Yeah, right.
But she's got a lot of memories too.
Yeah. No, she said no.
Yeah,
You know.
well, I've met her. She's a very nice lady, very nice lady.
We've been married 63 years.
God bless you, boy. Wow, that's an achievement.
Yeah.
Achievement today.
Yeah.
Now, are there any other, now, fellas, any other things you'd like to share about your memories? I know you're an entirely different generation, but before we bring this to a close, one of the, and I'm going to ask Bob this, but Bob, one of the things, what was one of your fondest memories of growing up in Leominster? We'll get back to that. What are some of the things like, Jim?
I'd like to bring up, Bob, just how important Doyle Field was to us when we were kids. There was so much activity going on over there all day. During the daytime, you had to get up early enough.
I gotta shut this off.
To make it over to the field so that you could get on a team. There were so many pickup games going on. There were 3 diamonds over there, and there would be 3 different games going on. And then maybe in the afternoon, the Leominster High School would play their games there. Often afterwards, after they'd finish, the Babe Ruth team would come in afterwards until they built the Babe Ruth field down on Lancaster Street. And then on Sundays, they'd have a doubleheader with Harper's Farmers, the Blackstone Valley League and the like. And at nighttime, often what would happen is, because we didn't have the softball fields down off Litchfield Street yet, all 3 of the diamonds would be taken up with the men's softball league.
Men's league, right.
Yeah.
It was incredible. It was incredible. It was teeming with activity over there. And of course, that was the upper field. Of course, when you look down at the lower field, there was nobody there because you weren't allowed down there. And the caretaker, Pop Hardy, if he caught you down there, that would,
know Mr. Hardy. I remember Mr. Lloyd Hardy, a nice man.
Very nice man. But it was his field and it was his grass.
That's right.
And
the only time in those days that the field was used was just for the football games, right?
High school.
For the high school football games. It was now it's used for a number of things, and it's, the renovation and so on. I may have, I used to work for the playgrounds, and when you guys were kids, because I worked for the Leominster Playgrounds, and one of my spots was Doyle Field.
Had the little place behind the grandstand on the upper field.
Yes.
Keep you out of the sun.
Yeah. And the bleachers and the ping pong table. And we had Joseph E. Lee Day. I don't know if this was in the summer, the big thing with the play. He was the founder of the Playgrounds movement or something in the United States. But, so I maybe this would have been in the 1960s, early 60s, late 50s, early 60s. So Jim, yes, Doyle Field was tremendously, it still is. It's a wonderful, wonderful facility, thanks to Bernard Doyle and Miss Doyle.
Well, back then also was the recreation was downtown.
Yes, the recreation center, the rec center.
We used to play basketball. We used to have swimming.
Yeah, that was a wonderful, wonderful facility. That's now where the
span as a church, I think an all-denomination church.
Yes, and it was the former rec center building. Before that, the Rialto Theater.
That's right.
In fact, I've said this in other interviews. If you stop at the traffic lights and look up, you can still see the RT.
The Rialto Theater. You mentioned that's where we had our class play.
Oh, the Leominster High had the class play.
Leominster High.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I have you graduate. This is your class ring.
Oh yeah.
Graduated from Leominster High. What year, Bob?
1941.
1941. And this pin, I want looking. This is a pin.
That's for the Disabled American Veterans, past commander.
Past commander of the Disabled American Veterans.
Right.
So, all these honors, you served your country well, and
there you go. But Bob was always, he was in the Navy too, He was on the Saratoga, Sarasota.
Aircraft carrier.
Aircraft carrier.
1965 to 1969.
That was in Vietnam.
Vietnam.
Well, thank you for your service too. And I was a scout.
Yeah, there you go.
And I know Don is on the fire department.
Right.
Jim is
Yeah.
a retired teacher, and
Jim's
Bob's
a retired
Bob's a
teacher.
postal worker.
I'm a retired postal worker. I'm a retired teacher. And
Oh,
Bob,
Jimmy is.
Jimmy is retired.
Yeah, he retired from Fitchburg High.
Ah, okay, I retired from Lunenburg. Okay, and Bob, postal worker?
Postal, I worked for Digital for 30 years.
Yeah.
And then when Digital downsized and all that, I happened to get a job and is delivering the mail in Acton.
Ah, very good. So we all have some connection to
Yeah.
government
And
service.
getting back to the teaching and all that, our class was when they were building the new high school.
Yeah.
Okay, we went double sessions at Carter.
Yeah.
It was the high school at that
Yeah.
time, so that it kind of broke up the sports area. Football, we had to practice in the morning or whatever, and then the whole team got together, on Fridays or Saturdays to play the game. But it kind of eliminated us from the seniors and the juniors.
At that time,
We were all
yeah.
by ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. And now you look at Carter, and the building itself
Right.
is a disaster area, sadly.
And how many times has that high school been added on to since we left it?
Yes, yes. The Carter building was my high. I was the old Leominster High.
I went to Carter.
You went to, and you
Yeah,
went to
that was
Carter.
Leominster
That
High
was
then.
Leominster High, a beautiful, building at one time.
The same way
Sad.
Gallagher. I went to Gallagher
Yeah,
too.
Yeah, which is still, Gallagher is still a beautiful
It
building.
is.
To conclude our interview, Bob, is there one thing, I know there's so many fond memories of growing up in Leominster and being a Leominster person, but is there one of your fondest memories? This is kind of an unfair question. Is there one thing you'd like to leave with our LATV viewing audience?
Well, I don't know. We used to enjoy the trolley cars.
That era?
And
Yeah.
on a Sunday, we would get on the trolley, go to Whalum, you make the loop, and we'd end up way up in West Fitchburg, And of course, when we were in Whalum, we'd always get an ice cream cone,
Yeah.
And that was
For a
that was
nickel,
really
right?
A treat. That was
Yeah.
that
Oh,
was
yeah,
a
there
treat.
was-
Yeah. And now, the 2009 Whalum is gone,
Gone.
and so many
Yes.
of those things. So
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why these interviews, which will be archived, for the future, people will be able to look back on things the way they were. So, gentlemen, I want to thank you very, very much, Bob, Don, and Jim. And as always, I want to thank Kyle Pimarini, Jack Sully, Dennis Cormier, Tina Pimarini, and Ken Cardell from Fitchburg State, who is helping us with the camera work today. And as always, I want to thank the LATV viewing audience. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, nice job.